all set here. I appreciate the interest in this. Our first order of business is attendance. And I'll go around the table. Adam Mock?
Yep.
The police
Mr. King?
Yeah.
And Craig Fournier. So we have 3 members here tonight. I'm going to read a little bit about how we're going to conduct this meeting. This is a hearing, public hearing on the Wetlands Ordinance, which I assume most of you have read. It's on the town website.
Miss Kathy.
Could I ask you please to speak into your mic so that I can hear you? I've got my hearing
sure.
aid. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Yeah, that sounds better. Okay, a little background. This has been in the works for 2 years, probably.
Yeah.
And it's gone through a whole bunch of revisions. People have commented in various aspects of it.
You're okay.
And the final version, Kathy Bacon just arrived.
Yes, I did.
Excellent. So you are here. Would you mind taking the place of Susan Young's?
No, I would not. That's why I'm here.
That's good. Thank you. So I'm
Sorry.
here tonight.
You all right?
And it's gone through a lot of revisions, and the planning board has passed it. We passed it in June. And tonight's hearing is a chance for the public of Webster to have their input, what they say, whatever. And the procedures we're going to follow are, I'm going to read them because I'm not making this up. It's just defined. Okay. So we're going to ask first for residents in favor of the proposal or the ordinance, then residents opposed to the ordinance, then anyone who else wants to speak, and then any written correspondence. I'm asking that anyone who wants to speak stand up and identify themselves, their name and their location. This is not working.
Well, it's on. It's just not making it up.
You want to try that?
Let's try this way.
Is that better? Okay. So please identify yourself, your name, and your address in town. I want all the questions directed to me, and then I will ask the Webster Conservation Commission to answer those questions. So in this case, the Webster Conservation Commission is going to take the role of being the expert witness because they have been intimately involved with this. And they know the stuff backwards and forwards. So at the end of this meeting, I will poll the board as to what we want to do next. If there are just minor changes in wording, for example, it probably doesn't meet the criteria of having another meeting. However, if there are substantial changes, then we will have to have another meeting, probably in another month, in October. I hope that's clear. Are there any questions at this point? Okay. So let's move on. Anybody want to speak in favor of the ordinance?
Presentation?
Oh yeah, I am so sorry. We're going to have a yes.
Just a quick question. Is this being broadcast?
It's on the YouTube.
They said there's no, I just got a text from somebody who was trying to watch at home and said there's no link and the camera doesn't seem to be on with a red light. I don't know.
We're using
All right.
this.
So YouTube,
Yes,
the way.
it picks it up. It's recording right now and streaming.
I'll just stop. Thank you.
Yes, so Sue Roman from the Webster Conservation Commission is going to give a short presentation of why this is a good idea for the town of Webster. Sue?
Okay, so we'll start with that wonderful picture. Her name, the dog's name is Maisie, and she's swimming in a lovely little wetland area. And remember her for later. Would you switch to the next slide, please? Can you hear me? No? Okay. All right. First, I thought I'd start with a little bit of a definition of wetlands. They are areas inundated or saturated with water, which in normal conditions support a prevalence of vegetation that lives in saturated water or saturated areas. So it sounds a little circular, but it generally means that the soils are saturated, and to a greater or lesser degree, certain plants grow in them. Then there's different kinds of wetlands and different kinds of plants according to the wetlands' biological features. And these plants and the wetland play very important roles, which I'm going to talk to you about. So that's sort of a scaled down definition of a longer scientific definition. Recognized types include marshes, wet meadows, shrub wetlands, swamps, peatlands, and among us we can tell you which ones we have in town and where they are if you should want to get into that. Next slide. Okay, so the big question, why should we do this? And I'll just go through the bullet points, and then I want to just kind of talk about some of the most important reasons briefly. Preserve national drainage and stabilize riverbanks to reduce flooding. Protect the quality and quantity of drinking water, surface waters and wetlands, groundwater recharge and discharge. Support a diverse natural habitat of plants, wildlife, and fish, and aquatic life. 90% of New Hampshire endangered species depend on wetlands for survival. So that's a comment on the wildlife importance, but there's all other kinds of wildlife other than endangered on the land around wetlands. Enhance the scenic beauty and provide opportunities for recreation. Minimize economic damage because they are flood sinks. It minimizes damage to public and private property. And it is in line with supports the goals of the master plan and the hazard mitigation plan. And I'm just mentioning here the last two bullets. We've created an extensive bibliography on the town website, and in many cases we've taken lengthy reports and condensed them down to shorter, more easy reading. But the heart of this ordinance is clean water. Clean water for us to recreate in, to swim in, clean water for the wildlife around it to drink and to support flora, and clean water for us to drink. Because wetlands function as big filters. So all of the storm runoff that comes from the surrounding areas, the uplands from the wetlands, that stormwater runoff contains fertilizer, nutrients from fertilizers, phosphorus and nitrogen and nitrites. Also, the emissions from oils and gases from cars, pesticides, and other toxins. So they get washed into wetlands. And wetlands are sort of the place where a lot of this gets filtered out so that it doesn't end up in our surface waters where we recreate. It doesn't end up in our groundwater. And the way they do this, and we'll go into this in a little more detail later, the way they do this is not only through their shape. When floodwaters come in, they spread out, and the plants in the wetlands trap sediments, and those plants also remove nutrients. Some plants actually eat those nutrients, like nitrogen, which if they are in abundance, create things like cyanobacter and algae blooms. So the wetlands, both through their plants and their roots and their shape, help to clean the stormwater runoff. They are a big filter for our clean water. Okay, so and we'll get to, the other thing is that I want to mention now because it'll help us later in later slides. When the wetland does some of this function itself, but when the wetland gets overloaded with these pollutants and toxins and nutrients, they stop functioning. And that's why it's important to have a buffer. And the buffer, what I mean by buffer is like on this very poor drawing I've made, these are cattails, and I don't know what these are, but this is the wetland, and this is the land around the wetland, the borderland. And if this is vegetated, it does a lot of the same work that's done in the wetlands. And different wetlands have different vegetation, but we have some experts here that can talk about all the different kinds of vegetation in the wetlands. But so what happens is if this you don't want the wetland to get overloaded because it stops doing its job of filtering out pollutants, and so that's why you have a buffer. And I'll get into preferably, ideally, a natural buffer. So put this back on now. Okay, next slide, please. So what does the ordinance do? It creates an overlay district, and that includes the wetlands with a buffer around them. And I'm going to show you a map in a minute. It defines permitted uses. It regulates that district. It regulates uses in that district. And again, that district is the wetland and its buffers. And it defines permitted uses in there, prohibited uses, and uses that are allowed with a conditional use permit, and that is issued by the planning board. And what is an overlay district? Some questions have come back to us about, well, what do you mean by an overlay district? So can I have the map, the next slide? So you'll see on there, it's hard to see, but there are red lines that represent buffers around wetlands, and there are red lines that represent rivers in town. And then there are some orange lines with green areas that are the smaller wetlands in town that we're regulating. I want to make it clear that we do not regulate, this ordinance does not regulate every single wetland in town, and I'll get to that on this slide, later in this slide, that there are two levels. Our more selective, important wetlands, and they have a 100-foot buffer, and at level 2 are smaller wetlands. Those are quarter-acre or larger, but not in level 1, and they have a 50-foot buffer. So the district is basically what you see there. It doesn't cover the whole town. It only covers the wetlands and their buffers. So everything that you see that's just sort of white in there is unregulated. And I've already started to mention level 1 and level 2. Level 1 is composed of our what we consider our most important wetlands in terms of their function. And we had an environmental, GZA environmental, there were a group of wetland scientists and soil scientists, and they mapped out our 25 top wetlands. So those went into level 1. Those have very high functionality, or a number of functions. And I'm going to speak about one in a minute, ecological integrity. But and then we have also in that level 1 selected surface waters that we consider important for these functions, for flood storage, for cleaning the water, and wetlands with 2 acres or more, 2 acres minimum, but have 4 different functions, and vernal pools. And then, as I said, in level 2, wetlands of a quarter acre or more, not in level 1, are the 50-foot buffer. Okay. The importance of natural buffers. Next slide, please. Okay, so we started to talk about this already, that when the wetland gets too polluted or too sedimented, it can't function. So the best way to protect wetlands is to put buffers on them. And again, you see the beneficial functions: removing, trapping, transforming nutrients, pollutants, and toxins. In some cases, they are removed, like nitrogen is fixed by plants and used by the plants and absorbed. In some cases, there are chemical reactions that take place in sunlight, and based on the various plants in the water and the water's makeup, there are chemical reactions that break down, transform some of the pollutants into harmless things. What happens usually is that the sediment, the wetlands trap the sediment that comes down with runoff, but also these buffers do the same functions. So if they're working, then we won't have it go into the wetland and ruin the wetland, because the wetland, and I can show you on this map, the wetlands are connected with surface water we use and groundwater we use. That's where things can really percolate down into groundwater and drinking water. And of course, providing habitat for wildlife and clean water for wildlife. We reviewed a lot of scientific papers. We have a bibliography online, and any of us will be happy to talk to you about anything in them. We have all read them. And the scientific consensus is that 100-foot buffers are recommended as a reasonable minimum buffer. That means, first of all, that means that the 50-foot buffer is not entirely adequate. It can get up maybe 50-60%, depending on the nutrient or the pollutant or whatever. And we have papers with graphs in them that show all this. They can do some of the work, but it's a 100-foot buffer that captures most of it. So that's why in level 1, which is our sort of most important wetlands, we have a 100-foot buffer. Let's see. And I want to say, so the 50-foot buffer is already a compromise from what you really need to keep the wetland clean, but we also know that 100-foot buffers are inadequate for a number of other purposes. If, for instance, the hydrology of the area, the slope of the upland areas can require a longer buffer, and a lot of wildlife actually, for it to serve as good habitat, require a much wider buffer. 300 feet, I've seen some 600 feet, depending on the wetland and what kind of wildlife is around it. So we tried to be reasonable in this. We didn't try to go for maximum buffers, but the 100-foot buffer, I think if you, and please don't hesitate to ask about that, where we found that information, because I know that, that's an important issue, is how did we pick these buffers? And we can show you the graphs that show why 100 feet is the one that does most of the work.
To put it into perspective, how wide is this road?
Would you stand up and state your name, please?
My name is Kim Fortune, I'm from Webster. To put a 100-foot buffer into perspective for everybody in the room, could you tell us the width of this room right here, so that we can understand what a 100-foot buffer actually is like in real life?
I don't know. I think we approximated to the end was 70 feet.
70.
About
This
70.
is 38 feet wide. Count the ceiling tiles at 4 feet long.
So it's
That's
3
38
times.
feet.
It's 3
So
times.
a 100-foot buffer
Right.
would be 3 times the width of this road?
Right.
Correct? Thank you.
Let's hold our questions till at the end of this presentation.
Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, what are the effects of the ordinance? It applies primarily to new uses and development on existing lots and subdivisions that are approved by the planning board. So, and this combines really with the second bullet. Existing uses may be continued. So grandfathering law applies to this. So if you have a use within that buffer now, you can continue that use, as long as it's a legal, non-conforming use. Legal meaning before the ordinance, it was a legal use. As I said, some new uses are prohibited, some new uses or expansion of an existing use may require a CUP. And no additional requirements for timber harvesting or existing agricultural uses beyond those required by the state. So we have the timber industry is completely left untouched by this. They do whatever they do according to best management practices, and that's what they do. Agriculture, the state really protects agriculture, and state statutes go a long way to protect agriculture. So, for instance, the tilling of soil and planting of crops under state statutes can never be prohibited in any zoning district in the state. It says, it also says that existing uses and some expansion of those uses, subject to some conditions like best management practices, can also happen. And it has some exceptions regarding that. So, and third, the definition of agriculture in the state is very broad. But clearly there will be some uses that are prohibited, but the existing uses are protected. And quite a few expansions of those existing uses are protected. And they're not. I don't know if you want to recognize that. Somebody's waiting.
Yes, would you stand up?
John Collins, Crimson Hill Road. I just wondered what the acronym CUP stands for.
Oh, conditional use permit. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Next slide, please. Okay, so we did an impact analysis. You saw the map and you saw the total of what was the district, which is basically the wetlands and some buffers around them, some of the rivers, some of the surface waters with the buffer around them. And we had Central New Hampshire Regional Planning help us with doing this impact study. And basically it says, if we look only at commercial space, open space, and residential land, and assume no impact on conservation land, institutional land, utility, and right-of-way land, if we go to that third category, we have a range of land impacted in town of 3.6 to 4.2%. That averages out to about 3.8%. No, 3.9%, I think. Anyway, I can't do the math. So it's about a little over 3% of those land spaces that are on there. If the floodplain is excluded, then it goes down. And the reason it's a range is because we have a section under level 1 that only admits wetlands into regulation if they have 4 or more functions. So that makes it, the 3.6 and 4.2 are sort of bookends of the two assumptions. You know, no functions up in, or less than 4 functions and 4 functions, up to 4 functions. So that creates that range. Looking at the 2-acre lots, and by the way, 2-acre lots, because of their size, we've reduced, in level 1, we've reduced the buffer to 75. In level 2, it would be 50. We have a lot of the lots on lakes are developed and grandfathered. I don't have a count of those, but quite a few lots on the lakes are developed, so they're not affected unless that use changes and is abandoned. Okay, all right. Next slide, please. Almost done here. Okay, how was this developed? Well, we started with a whole pile of ordinances from other towns. We picked a template. We started out with Auburn's template, but then we started to look at a lot of others to bring in things or to take out things. We cut it down in lots of ways. We collapsed 3 levels to 2. And the GZA helped us to identify, oh, I'm sorry. What?
Just pick it up.
Pick it up?
Yeah.
I don't know how to do these things. Okay. Are you hearing me anyway? Did you? I hope you heard what I said all this time. Oh my God. Okay. It's scaring me. So we worked with GZA Environmental to assess the 25 most important wetlands, and they assessed them for 11 different functions and values. And there's also a 12th one called noteworthiness, and that has to do with maybe some special character, like in historic areas involved or something. But about half of those 11 are actually related to the ability of the wetlands to do their job. And that's how well they trap sediments, how well they remove nutrients, etc. And those can be found online. One of our members in the commission did a summary of the GZA report, so you can also find that online and see how they were evaluated. And one thing I want to say is that I think is important is someone might ask, well, why do we need this? You know, our wetlands are great. Well, our wetlands are not great necessarily. The value that's called ecological integrity is the one that speaks to whether the wetland is functioning based on what it's supposed to do. And we have one functioning at a range of 0 to 10. We have one functioning at 10. We have another functioning below 4. And we have them sprinkled out along that range from 4 to 10. I think we have one at 9, and then we have some in the 8 area. But the numerical average of that, not weighted by acreage, but the numerical average of that, I wrote that down somewhere, didn't I? Is 7.25. So that's one thing to remember, is that they're not all undamaged. But the most important thing is you want to do something to protect them before they're damaged, because it's incredibly difficult and expensive to try to restore them, and I don't even know to the extent, I don't really know much about restoration, but so the idea, protect them now, hope that the ones that have been diminished can be revived just by nature, and protect the other ones. So I was saying we started with a bunch of ordinances. We had the GZA report. We conducted a very extensive scientific literature review, and those are on the website in a bibliography. And we've had this reviewed. We worked with Central New Hampshire Planning on the mapping and the impact study. We worked with New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commissions has commented on it. We had a private practice wetland scientist comment on it extensively. We had the New Hampshire timber owners comment on us and give us a clearance on our final language for the timbering industry. So their Timber Owners Association is all set with this. And we've had it reviewed by an environmental lawyer. Who reviewed it extensively and in detail. If I could just finish this slide, Kim, okay? In detail on all of this is on the website. Kim Fortune wants to be heard.
Are you finished?
I had a little bit more, but I'm as a practical matter finished. Yeah, I can go into permitted and prohibited uses, but they're pretty easy to see.
Okay, let's hear what Kim has to say.
I'm going to fortune never question. Could you chance name the environmental lawyer that you worked with?
I'm sorry,
Just
the
for
name
record.
again?
For the record, the
Amy
environmental lawyer.
Manzelli.
And she was stated on the slides.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Sorry.
So, in the slide packet, you will see a little list of permitted and prohibited uses, and uses that are required to have a conditional use permit, and that's something you can read yourself. I've tried to emphasize the treatment of agriculture and the treatment of timbering. And so what I'd just like to remind you that grandfathering is in place. It's a small impact on total land area, and it's really important for clean water and to have clean water, and not only in our surface waters, but in the wetlands, in the streams. Important for wildlife and domestic life, like Maisie, who swam in that wetland without any acid burns or any kind of pollution.
Okay, thank you, Sue. I appreciate that. All right, we're going to take comments comments in favor to begin with?
Questions, is there any questions?
Or statements, just statements in favor. Please stand up and identify yourself.
Yeah, Jack Schwartz, on Frost Lane. Just a couple of clarification questions for Sue. Was there any feedback from DES as far as the ordinance itself, either positive, negative suggestions? I know you worked with the Planning Commission.
Well, we worked we connected with DES a lot, and I should have put them on the paper. They
Okay.
didn't review the whole ordinance, but there were questions we had about definitions, surface waters, and how things were regulated by the DES as sort of a sounding board. We talked a lot with the chair of the Conservation Commission in Bow, but yes, we did from time to time connect with DES.
And related, am I correct in the assumption that this ordinance is kind of middle of the road? Other towns have ordinances that are much more strict
Yes.
and
Yes.
others that are
No,
less
you're right.
strict, so.
As a matter of fact, the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commission said so. That it's pretty direct and middle of the road approach, and it's we did do a lot of things. A lot of ordinances have slope adjustments. If there's a steep slope in the upland area, it makes the buffer longer. We took that out. A lot of them have setbacks from the buffer, structure setbacks from the buffer. We took that out. We collapsed it from a 3-tier system to a 2-tier system. We collapsed in the Auburn ordinance that we used. It was a bigger buffer. We made it 100. I think it was 125 is what we started with. We made it 100. We tried very hard to tailor this to Webster's situation, and I would appreciate it if people who are against this think that there's some way that we could pass this and tell me what about it is offensive to you, so that because what we have
Next.
Very good, thank you.
Anybody else want to speak in favor? Any? Please stand, say your name.
Kara Gunville. I just wanted to ask a question about lakes, because you said that they're grandfathered. So who oversees clear cutting on lakes? Because the lots are X size. People who are building a new house or existing houses, and who oversees taking the natural shoreline away and bulkheading it with whatever they want to bulkhead it with? So I know part of it's the state, but can the town do anything? I know in Winnapocket there's at least a half a dozen that are bulkheaded.
Well, what we have first of all, we already, not all, when you say it's all grandfathered, all we can say is there are a number of lots that are developed, but there are some that are undeveloped. So they would come under the ordinance theoretically. And your question about clear cutting is very good. I mean, that's, some of that is already prohibited by the Shoreline Water Quality Protection Act. In fact, it gives you, I think, about 25 feet of natural buffer, and then the next leg of that is a basal area test of what you can take out and what you can't. So a lot of it is going to be, is going to be compliance with that, best management practices by the people who are timbering, but generally the ordinance should should act to protect beyond that.
So you're saying this ordinance?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I know once people, they just say, hey, I've got too many trees around here, I don't like pine trees, I don't like in-laws.
Yeah.
They're gone.
Yeah.
Then they're gone.
Yeah.
And they say, well, you're going to have to plant a tree for every tree you cut down.
Yeah.
Fine, you cut a tree down this big, and you got a tree this big.
Mm-hmm.
So all that water is going down into the lakes, and then when they bulkhead, I mean, it looks like the devil, but I didn't think it was allowed.
Right. Good.
Right.
Any other comments?
Have I been recognized?
Yes. Stand up, state your name, please.
Okay, yes, Chris Shadler, Tyler Road. Really good point. So DES is sort of the master control for situations like you're talking about. Locally, DES wants local towns to have wetland ordinances that are a little bit tougher than DES standards, because DES standards are pretty bottom of the rung. So this would be a little bit better than that. In terms of enforcement, and I think your question also asked about enforcement.
Because I would think that they would need to have a permit.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Bulkhead, a permit to cut down.
That's right, you're right.
But
And
then
so-
they just go, I don't
Yeah,
care.
do people do things that they shouldn't do? Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And can we be everywhere to watch over that? No. And neighbors are the people that, if they see a problem, should report it to our land use coordinator, who would then contact the Conservation Commission and the enforcement officer, and hopefully we can stop the problem from growing. But we agree with you. There are problems all over town exactly like that. So we're hoping that with an ordinance that may help to solve some of these problems by giving us a little bit more standing with DES.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I'd like to follow up on that point.
Your name?
Yeah. Jim Clark Dog, 65 White Plains Road. Yes, DES has extensive regulations on dealing with what you do on your waterfront. A lot of it is ignored, as Tara pointed out. Several people have put up walls in violation. They're clearly there. Anybody can ride around the lake in their kayak, and we'll see these walls. Docks require regulations as to what you put in. You have to have a permit. None of this is being enforced. Why is an ordinance that doesn't even define these things? DES does. Why is an ordinance going to solve anything? Because we've been doing this for years. I mean, DES regulations on waterfront have existed for at least a couple of decades, if not longer.
What do you mean it doesn't define things, though? I don't understand.
You don't define. What is a dock that needs a permit?
Well, it's underlined. The dogs.
No, you actually include water that's inundated, which is lakes.
Yeah.
So you put a dock in a lake. What are your requirements for that dock?
Well, they have to get a conditional use permit, and the planning board is the one that decides whether they can get the conditional use permit.
So what is a dock that is going to get a conditional use permit? What is a dock that's not going to get a conditional use permit? DES defines that. I can put in a 4x40 dock by just applying for a permit. Anything else, I need to put in a plan. If I put in something that is too extensive for the lot, it is clearly defined, that will be denied.
Yeah.
So where is your definition of, can I put one rock along the shore? Can I put 100 rocks along the shore? You're not defining any of this stuff so that a lake owner can figure out what he can do and what he can't do. You're not saying, well, you can't chop down a tree. You don't even define what a tree is. Well, wait a minute. Think about this. When a maple tree is about yay high, is it a tree?
If we did this, this would be thousands of pages long. You know,
Right, which is what the state has done.
Yeah, so that would just.
But you want to put in a law that's going to require us to do things, and you're not telling us what to do.
Well, but that that we see as a good thing. We see that there's more flexibility in this for the planning board to decide whether, you don't have to have it be, it can't be more than, it's still gonna be dependent on the circumstances. And there's standards in here for the planning board to decide on. But for us to just define what size of dock, that makes it more restrictive. We're trying not to make it more restrictive. So you go to the planning board and they have to administer that evenly and with rationality. But they're not tied down to a certain width, a certain length, a certain angle on it. They can decide that, and that makes this ordinance more flexible, I would contend, and more acceptable.
Yes, it's more flexible, but it's more flexible both ways. It can be worse than what the state has out there already. It can be better than what the state has. We have no idea, nor can what your statements do bind a planning board 10 years into the future. 10 years into the future, a planning board might decide, we don't want any docks put into lakes.
But they would have to have the town vote that. I mean, if the statute now, the ordinance is written clearly allows docks. If there would be that kind of substantive change, it would have to go through town vote again to amend it. That's state law. They can't amend it by themselves. They can do that with subdivision regulations. They cannot do that with land use zoning regulations.
To put in a new dock requires a conditional permit, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I decide, I've already got a dock that is actually legally in place. I have a permit from the state.
That's grandfathered.
Right, that's grandfather. But let's say I didn't have a dock and I decided to put in a dock.
Right.
You're saying, well, the conditional use permit would allow me to do that. What I'm saying is, what happens if a planning board 10 years down the road decides that no, we don't want docks, therefore we're not going.
They can't do that. I mean, not unless the situation really, there are standards in the ordinance, if you read, on how they decide this.
Right.
They cannot decide it in a way that violates equal protection or takes property value away. There are constitutional limits on that. So they can't arbitrarily decide, well, no docks all of a sudden. No, that's what they would be sued, and who was suing them would win.
All right, can we finish here? Another comment, Kim?
I'm Kim Fortune, and I have a question for the whole Conservation Commission, whereas beginning back in at least 2014, in bringing this to our Selectmen's Board and asking at that point in time, again revisiting it numerous times, can this Conservation Commission answer, has the 1871 ordinance been repealed that subsequently allows Concord to, that is actually in section 12, chapter 48 of the general laws of 1871, that Concord City Hall attorneys told me was still in fact in place pertaining to water and land rights in Webster. Has that in fact been repealed in accordance to the ordinance of 1871? Otherwise, this ordinance, I believe, is not even necessary because our state general law was superseded. So until, as I brought to the selectmen, the remedy and redress is in the law itself of 1871, of which our selectmen must petition the court and ask for either a monetary compensation or to be alleviated and find remedy, or Webster's other option is to get all of our legislature to repeal the ordinance. My understanding, it is still on the City of Concord's website as an ordinance in place to this day. It is right here in print. Numerous times I brought it to the selectmen that have been on this board since a minimum of 2014. And I believe state law supersedes.
Well, I
a local ordinance.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Because otherwise, Webster residents, my understanding of this ordinance, and I've done very in-depth research into it because of the effects that it has on each and every one of us as inhabitants here. In 1874, Bosquen repealed their part. Webster never did it. It's still on the books.
Thank you, Kim. Are there any other comments?
I'm sorry, would this board like a copy? Again?
It's, surely. It sounds to me like a select board issue. That's what it sounds like.
But there's no sense in having this ordinance.
Well, if
There's no sense in even having it.
But
It's
you-
already an ordinance in place.
Let's
I get what
let
you're saying.
Sue respond. Use your mic,
If
please.
this is an ordinance that's a state ordinance that preempts,
Absolutely.
I don't know of it, and probably a lot of towns don't. I don't know how,
This only
but I'll be.
pertains to Webster
It's,
alone.
if that itself will make this ordinance invalid, then we ought to answer that question.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
As I brought to the select board, that numerous people sitting in this room have actually been on that board at the time when I got dismissed.
Yeah.
Which
well-
would alleviate, unfortunately, all the awesome work that your commission does.
Well, thank you for that. And I
Unfortunately,
certainly.
no one moved forward with it and brought it public.
Yeah, okay. Well, I
So I can
definitely.
show it to you right here. Unfortunately, I was not able to print it out at my house. But
Okay.
it's right
Well,
behind.
thank you, Kim.
Yeah, show it to me.
Do we have any other comments?
I just have a question on definition.
Would you stand up, state your name, please?
Yeah, Nancy Rosborough on Battle Street. I'm looking for a definition for your buffer. Where does the buffer start? At what source of the wetlands?
Okay, yeah.
You know, does it start where the good tree sits and all the other ones beyond it are dead? Or is it back where the ferns start and then you go back? What is your buffer?
Well, okay, well, you see, buffers decide, but what you're talking about is edge, the word edge, because it's measured from the edge of the wetland.
Okay.
All right, so that's how the language goes. That, if there's a dispute over it, that gets decided by a wetland scientist. What I envision, after I've spent almost 20 years on the planning board myself, or 18 or something like that. Anyway, what I envision is that the planning board, goes out there, we look at it and we say, there's the edge, here's the buffer.
Okay.
And you agree. There's going to be a lot of that here. There's going to be a lot of self-enforcement, hopefully. And there's going to be, just shorthanding it. I mean, most of the protection there is going to be there for the 50 feet or whatever the buffer is. So technically, if there's a dispute, it gets answered. But if you walk up to a wetland, you can probably tell me what you think the edge is, right? You can say.
Well, on a rainy day, I could.
On a rainy day.
Further if it's drier. So,
Well, maybe we have to test that on several different days, is what you say.
I'll have to
Okay,
go revisit.
fair
Now,
enough, fair enough.
What if there was, it was never really a wetland years ago and
Yeah.
has built a dam
Yeah.
and now it's all sod?
Yeah, I
What
know.
happens with that?
I know. Well, that's the thing. I guess that we would have a wetland sign or the zoning enforcement officer who's going to be trained in some of this to take a look at it and see if we're really going to have a dispute over this. Because if I'm the planning board member, I would say, look, I want to get most of the protection done. I don't want to spend a lot of money and a lot of time hiring scientists. I just want to get her done, and have some protection there. So if I don't know if you're talking about a 40-foot discrepancy or a 3-foot discrepancy, but it's going to have to be.
13 is all I know on your map.
So I think that's going to be a combination of having to consult an expert on some cases and just kind of going with what looks obvious and what is mostly protected. And I hope that all boards have to do that. They have to use their discretion to make this a workable ordinance, and it doesn't cost everybody $1 million.
So my next question is, for tax purposes, taxes for wetlands or something, and you get the extra 100 feet. Now with me, that's 1.5 acres of buffer that I'll be giving over to you guys.
Yeah.
That's a lot of acreage when you don't have a lot to deal with.
Well, if you're less than 2 acres, it would be 75.
Well, on 2 acres,
Yep. but, okay.
Land,
So,
5.6 of wetland and 2 acres of.
so you wanna see a tax exemption for that as well as a,
Something
but
has to
I
be
don't
done
know,
if you're losing it.
I don't know about, I guess, 1.5 acres, you're saying for,
Well, because I've got land on both sides of the wetland. So you've got so much 100
There.
feet out by
So much.
305,
Yeah.
and then you got,
yeah.
you know,
So-
100 feet out of 355 feet.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
square footage wise, it's 1.5 acres.
Yeah, I that's a question I can't answer, but I hear your, issue about fairness. I'd like to see what some of the other towns do with it, do with that question. I don't know that there's a tax adjustment for, there are tax adjustments for conservation land, that's not really a
Or
conservation
current use
easement,
or something like that, but-
so, I can't answer but I hear your concern.
Do we know that her wetland has a 100-foot buffer?
I don't.
What is her wetland?
What is your wetland?
I'm number 13 on your map up there. I'm on Battle Street, just over
Oh, that's
the
not that
Salisbury
map,
line.
it's the other map, I can't even see. What, do you have, anybody have, you wanna put the map down?
So what do they say about getting through the wetland to get to your other section of land that you can't get to? Is there some way to bridge that?
I'm sorry, what, I'm
Is
sorry.
there some way to bridge that?
Bridge what?
If I want to get to my other 2 acres of land that I can't reach because it's
There are roads allowed under CUP?
over the wetland?
Yes,
Oh,
not over the wetland, not over the buffer. I don't
Okay.
think there's roads allowed over, that's a DES matter.
okay, so
Yeah. Yep.
Because I can't get to the other side unless I put on waivers or something.
Yeah, no, that's, that would probably
So,
be.
yeah,
a-
I mean,
If you're gonna put in a road, then you need to have DES.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
David, state your name and address, please.
David Mike, Poston Bridge. I just have a question for clarification. Maybe this was already answered. I'm sorry I was late. Who is in charge of maintaining and updating the overlay maps, be it for the example of adding an additional wetland or adjusting the size up or down of an existing one or removing one if it no longer exists?
Well, as to, there's only one map that is a legal map, which is, I'm not sure it's that one, I think it's level 1 only. Yeah. There's a map that looks like that, that's only level 1 wetlands. And that is a legal map in the sense that the coordinates on that help define the wetland that's being regulated. Level 2 requires some self-identification. That's another one that requires some common sense, like you can find out if the size is greater than a 1/4 acre probably from DES, because they can map that. But we can't map everything because some of the wetlands are under trees. They're like swamps, and there's canopy, so some of that stuff doesn't get mapped. So that map for level 2 is do the best you can, and is not a legal part. The description is the legal part of the enforcement. Greater than a 1/4 acre, and not in level 1. That attempts to get everything, that map, that level 2 map attempts to get everything, but the ordinance still, if it's not on the map, the ordinance still regulates it. Okay, so so that wouldn't change in level 2. Level 1 is a legal map in the sense that it's part of the enforcement, and that I think would probably have to go through a town. I don't know. That's a good question, whether just administratively changing that, because it's not likely to change. It's not likely that there's going to be a new level 1 wetland. That's pretty, that's pretty unlikely. If it goes away, then it goes away. But for there to be a new one, I don't know. That would be probably. I don't know how that would happen.
So the map that goes with the ordinance, that's what we're talking about, right?
Right.
That's.
Yeah. Well, he's
that's-
talking about all maps, really, but
Yeah, but
one map is a legal map. for level 1. And then the other map is a helper map to
Okay.
help people identify where those wetlands are.
Okay. Yes.
Mayor Jo Gallen, Clumsy and Bourne Hill. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. I think what you're saying is that level 1 are described legally via a map. These are the wetlands that are in level 1.
Especially,
Level 2 are described, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, level 1, only the GZA parts are, but the rest of level 1, like, vernal pools, that's a good example. That's not shown on, vernal pools aren't shown on the maps, for instance. So there are parts of level 1 that are not shown on that map. But if they fall within the GZA wetlands, the 25 of them, that's on that map, and that's legal.
And then the level 2 are based on description. They meet these criteria.
Right, right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
just wanna
right.
make sure that-
And part of level 1 is based on description too, Mary Jo,
Right.
is my point, yeah.
Tara?
Thank you. This is the question that never goes away. Is Route 103 east on there? Because there are Webster houses on Route 103, and the person I'm talking about has a junkyard. So is that a level 1 because he's on the Warner River? And what do you do with something like that?
The Warner River is not in level 1, I don't believe. Let me check. I don't think so.
But he's in Webster and he's got a horrific junkyard right there, and I don't see it being an agricultural,
Well, let's see, Warner River wouldn't be, it would be in level 2 though.
I mean, the town has dealt with him for I don't even know how many years, and won, but lost. And I know Warner has too, but, I mean, does...
Oh, Warner River is in level 1, okay, so that is the buffer, so, yeah, you're telling me we got the junkyard, I know, we've tried.
Does his junkyard go right down to the river?
No, I haven't been down there, I don't know, but, I mean, it's a hill.
Yeah.
And, I mean, look at the vehicles, look at the oil, the transmission.
Yeah.
Fluid, the gasoline, I mean, it's beyond belief.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that, but
Okay.
if we have this, and I know this isn't gonna stop us, but we have no say about it because it's already been to court. And, you know, is it ever gonna get cleaned up? I mean, you gotta watch out driving by there, because there's animals in the road.
Yeah,
Thank you, Tara.
I know. Tara,
we
I
have
know
a
that's an issue, and it requires a lot of analysis, like, you know, about what's already there. Is that a legal use to do that? And that was a lot of what we needed to take care of that was a junkyard statute.
Yeah, that's sort of out of the scope of
But
this
no.
ordinance, because this ordinance grandfathers everything in, so.
Yeah, but grandfather's legal non-conforming uses, and I still have a question of whether that's a legal use.
Okay.
That's all. So I'm just right.
So, any other questions? I hear your hand was up.
This area, I noticed, is vastly overlapped now. And I think there's other areas you also have overlapped with existing laws. Where my sister's now living, where my father lived, it's definitely within 100 feet of the water. I had to replace the septic system. Step one, find an architect or an engineer who can design your plan. Then send it to the state of New Hampshire for their approval. Then send it to the town of Webster septic person. And now we're adding in, send it to the planning board. Virtually every lot on Lake Winnipocket is within 100 feet of the water. Septic systems last 30 years as an estimate. Every one of those is going to need to be replaced and is going to require the additional level of oversight that I'm not sure anybody on the planning board has the expertise to do, of looking at, is this septic system legal, where it's already heavily regulated. To get your plan approved for putting in that septic system costs over $7,000.
Yeah.
And that is what virtually every property on Lake Winnipocket is looking at. And now we're going to add in, oh, you have to go through the planning board. We don't know how long that's going to take, mind you, to get it approved.
Well, there are statutes that limit the time that a planning board can take to make, but you raise a good point. I think a couple of things have to be looked at, and that should be made, I think that it's gonna be grandfathered.
I mean,
Even the replacement, but I'm not sure legally, so I don't wanna give you the wrong answer.
I mean, if you're going through the DES, and the DES approves it, that's pretty solid.
But putting new septic systems in the.
Not a new septic system, a replacement.
But I'm saying, if I start from putting a new septic thing in, that would require a CUP, but with the planning board. But I think that this replacement is grandfathered, but I have to check that. To be honest.
It's grandfathered, but you need a CUP.
No, if it's grandfathered, you don't need a CUP.
Not the way it's written in there.
Wait.
Not the way it's written in there. You're right.
Yeah, not the way you wrote it. What you wrote was it requires
Right.
to get go through the planning board.
No, and I'll tell you why, because anything that's grandfathered by state law and the Constitution. So what requires a CUP is a new system that's never been there. Not a replacement or not fixing an existing system. There are plenty of things that are grandfathered in that, people have made a lawn with a barbecue thing. Okay. I know that. But what I'm telling you is anything that's grandfathered is not regulated by this. Period. I don't care what it says there. Because there's another section, you can ask another lawyer about this. I promise you. There's another section that says that whatever is grandfathered is not regulated by this ordinance. It's not regulated.
Then why is it in here?
Because for new systems, that's why it's in here.
Replacement septic tanks.
It can't be new.
That's not new. That's replacement septic tanks.
Okay, all right. All right. You're right. I'm sorry. You're right. I forgot to put in replacement. That should be looked at. Absolutely.
But
That
it's
should be
okay,
looked
because
at.
if that ordinance that I'm talking about is still on the books, it's only a $20 infraction.
That should be looked at. I don't know the answer to that.
It's written right in there as a $20 infraction. So who cares?
Do we have any other?
But to continue along, things that are, you're saying are prohibited uses, I'm not sure whether putting in a driveway, which is regulated if you're in that area already by DES. You've got to get a permit, you've got to get it approved. You then have to go through the town to get a driveway permit. And now, and this involves replacement. I'm not saying new uses, I'm saying replacement. If you replace your driveway within that zone.
No, the only reason that worked the way you said it worked is because it said replacement.
Well, that was his question.
Yeah, I know, but
And that
said
only lasts 30 years.
that said replacement septic tanks have to have a CUP. But a driveway that's already there and you have to fix it or put something, fill it in again, that's not a replacement. In other words, we don't say that you have to go for replacement driveways. That's grandfather. I'm not. I'm trying to, yeah, okay. No, I will spend time with you to explain that but the replacement thing should be looked at when it says replacement.
Right.
Okay, but if it, because that's saying you gotta get a new CUP, you gotta get a CUP for it if it's, you know, even if it's a replacement septic tank. But some towns do that, because they wanna see if you could put it somewhere else rather than in the buffer. Some towns do have that, and I think that got carried over from Monmouth.
DES asks whether it can be put someplace else already. And I guess that's my bigger concern is, what specifically is this ordinance going to provide us that DES and existing town regulations don't provide us?
It's going to keep a whole lot of land along these wetlands from new development. New development and new uses and protect the wetlands. That's what it's going to do.
Oh, yeah.
Then why is it discussing replacement?
Well, I agree with you that replacement is that one on the septic tank is a problem, but some towns are saying that so that they make sure that the way it's going in and everything that happens with it is not affecting the wetlands. If you start from a scientific standpoint, but not as a town, you know, as a citizen's, the issue about having it be too much trouble. If you start from a science, then you would want, if you wanted to know that the wetland would be protected, you would look at replacement systems and make sure that they weren't going to endanger the wetland. But I agree with you that, in a sense, the replacement should be grandfathered. But, so that could be looked at.
We will look at the replacement issue, so thank you for bringing that up. Do you have anything else that you want to bring up tonight?
Yeah, let's say I buy 5 acres of land on Lakewood Pocket from the Austin Trust, complete woodlands, and I decide to develop it. I already need to do that. Approval by DES, anything along the waterfront, within your buffer zone. I need approval by the planning board. To build on a lot, you need to get approval on what you're doing.
I'm sorry, what are you doing in this example?
I bought 5 acres of woodland from the Austin Trust along Lakewood Pocket. It's all woodlands. I already need to go to DES.
Well, what water body does it?
Lakewood Pocket.
Okay, it's on the lake?
Yeah. Let's say I buy where the big rocks are on Lakewood Pocket, which is owned by the Austin Trust. I buy 5 acres. I've got to get approval by DES for anything I do along the waterfront already.
And is there wetlands near there?
Lakewood Pocket.
No, the wetlands are the areas that are swampy, that are wet most of the time.
But we do have surface water, so we have a buffer on surface waters.
Yeah, they're saying surface water and wetlands.
Yeah, there's a buffer.
Yeah,
We're
so
trying
there's
to
a buffer of 100 feet,
Yep.
which already exists for DES.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
No, it doesn't. The Shoreline Water Quality Protection Act is not a 100-foot buffer.
50 feet, okay, but so there's a DES buffer.
Well,
There's a planning board that's going to sit on it and decide what I can build.
but I understand what you're saying, but this is the classic thing, and we really can't go on much longer with this, but this is the classic thing. Every environmental action in law creates, takes away some uses from property owners. That's the way it is. That's because you're trying to protect nature. And somewhere along the line, we have to decide at what price, do we not protect nature?
I'm not disagreeing with where you're going. What I'm saying is, we're not dealing with enforcing what we even have. So why do we need to add more on top of what we're not going to enforce?
Because hopefully we'll do it better with our new zoning enforcement officer. I'm hopeful we'll do it better. I don't think you stop trying to protect nature just because it's hard.
Yes, another question here.
I'm Mike Jetty on Close Bridge Road. So Sue, I just want to make sure I understand this. I mean, it's 14 pages of kind of legal stuff,
Yep.
right? So I'm going to use my own property as an example.
Yep.
And if you could just help guide me through what
Yep.
this means and how it applies. So
Yep.
we have, so we're right along Blackwater River. The 50-foot buffer goes through my living room. The 100-foot buffer goes to the road behind us.
our entire 0.86 acres is within the 100-foot buffer for the most part. It might be a corner that, you know, nips off, right?
It's all developed, it sounds like to me.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
we got a house, we got a garage, you know.
It's
and,
grandfather.
however, if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to add a room onto the house. My read of this is that there would be no way that I could add a room on. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
I guess it depends on the layout, but,
But it's all within 100 feet, and it says
all within 100 feet.
Yeah.
Well, this would be, and your acreage is what again?
0.86.
Oh, 0.86, so that's 75 feet for one thing. It's down to 75 feet.
But 50 foot goes through the middle of the house, you know. Our house is one of the yellow lots up there, less than 2 acre kind of thing, so. But basically, this does mean that even though, you know, and the thing is, and I totally appreciate, I think about Abby's property further down the river and the need to protect that land and make sure that that, you know, years from now stays as it is. I understand that, but we're on a little postage stamp, and it was developed back in the 60s, and it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But to now, and trust me on this, when we moved in, there was a serious issue with erosion along the riverbank. I went to DES. We paid a lot of money to permit properly, to do the work the way DES wanted the work to be done, to shore up and to protect the river, to prevent further erosion, and you know the island out in front of us from getting bigger, because that's our land out there. It's just growing in the middle as it sloughed off and ended up out there. So, you know, we've done a ton of work, but we've always also thought that someday we'd like to add on to the house. This sort of takes that away, right? So.
Yeah. Well, what could be considered there is, you know, a small lot, another kind of exemption for small lots.
So that's something that I would ask the planning board to consider, because, you know, I think it's important that we, and trust me, we're gonna do it the right way. We're not gonna do anything that we shouldn't do. We're gonna follow all the processes, but to say, sorry, you're stuck with the 3-bedroom cape you have. There's even a clause in here that says, you know, I can't even go vertical. I mean, I can't even put a dormer on the cape is the way I read this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's trying as hard as it can to have a natural buffer. But, you know, I mean, in your case, that's a very small lot, and I think that your issue ought to be considered. That's
you know, I mean, we have 200 foot of frontage, and there's probably 125, 150 feet of that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we paid a substantial amount of money to prevent further erosion along there with DES permitting. That's going to stay natural. We're never going to cut those trees down. We're not going to do anything. You know, and hopefully with the work that we did, it won't be undercut with the trees falling into the river, right? And that's why we did it. But our little part where we live, where the structures are, this says we can't do anything with it.
Well, the way this could be handled, maybe better than a small lot exemption is writing something under the CUP. To say that an addition to a structure within a small area can be done.
Or some restriction on the side. I mean, I'm not looking.
What kind of buffer? Can you tell me what kind of buffer you would be okay for you in the sense of putting that on? I mean, how much further would you have to encroach on the river? How many feet?
Actually, I wouldn't plan to go much closer to the river.
Okay.
I would be, but the problem is even if we expand sideways.
I get
you know, you would be, so you're not getting any closer to the waterway. Even if you came 5 feet closer, you know, it just, again, the way my read of this is we couldn't do it, right? And there's another restriction in there that talks about within the district, you know, the storage of, I mean, it talks about petroleum products, it talks about fertilizers and so forth, and it's like, so I can't even have a gallon of gas in the garage?
No, that's a current use. I mean, adding an addition on is different than an existing use.
It says prohibited uses and activities. No storage of petroleum products or hazardous chemicals shall occur within the district. I mean, that to me says you can't have a gallon of gas in your garage. And, you know, again, I understand that I don't want to take a gallon of gas and dump it on the river edge. That's craziness, right? So of course I protect it and handle it all the right way, but that's not what this says. This says no storage of petroleum products shall occur within the district.
But that's, again, that is That's a new use, that's a new use. That's already existing here.
Just, let me interrupt just a second here. These are good suggestions. I think we should take it up with the planning board
Yeah.
later. Let's address it right now.
Yeah, I just want to say
I
one more
just-
thing to Mike, and that is, I think that is an existing legal use, and that you would be able to just keep that there. I don't think that that CUP stuff is basically new uses. I really, now, the add-on is different, but I think the gas tank is
Do
coming.
we have more questions?
Craig, if I just may, so thank you for entertaining that.
Yeah, but I agree.
The point of the hearing is to hear questions and concerns down the line.
Right.
And if you can find a way to have a small lot carved out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just make sure, right, wrong, or indifferent, we're there, we're living, we're protecting it, but we just want it to be able to keep it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's a matter that we need to discuss as a planning board and when we think about this ordinance.
Thank you.
Yes, George.
Please stand, please.
One comment about Mr. Jenny's lot. That is in a class 1 buffer. There is no adjudicated relief according to your law.
Well, there is a variance, but.
No, there isn't. It says there are no variances in class 1 buffer.
No, it says there's no CUPs granted in
You can't
class.
get a CUP because there's no relief. That's how you phrased it.
You'd have to show me, but no, my understanding is that there's no CUP in level 1, there's only a variance. So there is relief.
I'll research it. That's the gentleman.
Okay.
John Pearson Road. My question is kind of related to Mike Jetty's. I just purchased a building lot on Postman Bridge Road, and it's a 3/4 acre lot, and it was part of the Blackwater Development Plan in 1968. And the width where I want to put a minimum size house, which is 800 square feet, according to the plan board, at 75 feet, because it's a small lot, will put the house, it's almost unbuildable. Now, if I fall to 50 feet, which is the guideline from the state, I think I can get it in there, no problem. With a septic on the other side.
Okay.
So is that something
So
like
that's a similar issue for a small lot.
So
That,
there are variances?
yes, yeah, I think that should be considered.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
That's a whole category that is the same.
Yeah.
Hi, Paul Lamley, Postman Bridge. I live right below the bridge. I'm in the same as what Mike is. I have 0.28 acres, okay? They're gonna be putting a new bridge in there. How is this buffer zone in your ordinance gonna affect all that?
Yeah.
Because as I look at it now, I can literally do nothing on 0.28 acres.
Do you have a house in there now?
I have a house, I have a garage.
And what's your proposal?
I'm asking what your ordinance and all your buffer zones and stuff are gonna do according to the new bridges that's gonna be going in there and how that's gonna affect me.
I can't say unless
I don't think that putting in a new bridge is going to affect anything regarding this ordinance. What's that?
Well, if it creeps over and they supersede and take some of his land.
You're going to have to take some of my land because they're gonna be straightening the corner.
Okay, so you're going to, so then.
I'm gonna be less than 0.28 of an acre when they finally get this all done.
Yeah, but in terms of from your setback from the river, how will that change your setback?
This house is already there. Everything is all in place.
Well, it's all grandfathered.
I can go 12 feet out my front door and be in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
Well,
I
it's
can go
all,
12 feet out the other door and be in the middle of the road.
well, isn't it grandfathered? I mean.
I don't know, that's what I'm asking.
Well, it is. Everything you've got now is grandfathered.
And like the gentleman said about the septic,
Well, that's because
we
it
had
had
to
the word.
jump through hoops to get a new septic system in there because the one we had was an old barrel into a pipe that went into a
get that, and because that was came from another ordinance, and not that I shouldn't have known it was there, it's there for replacement. So very conservative for the wetlands would be to monitor the replacement.
Right.
I agree that's a lot of administration and regulation for you. So
Yeah,
I think the whole issue of replacement stuff, we ought to look at that issue.
We got it right, because we dyed the system the whole 9 yards to find out whether it would go out into the water or not. It's not, so I mean, we're all good.
Well, that's great.
Just saying, it's
No,
you know, with what's written, you know, if I want to tear that place down and rebuild it and build it right, because it was an old camp that got built onto, I can't do that. Even though I would use the same foot plan, I wouldn't be going out any of the foot plan that's there now. When I first moved in there, we were told we could go vertical with it, but that was back in '96, so I understand things change and stuff, but it's, you know, what is it really doing besides saving the wetlands? You know?
Well, I think we understand your point here. Your point being that if you were to tear down your house and replace it, it would become under the ordinance. So, is that right? Am I understanding your point correctly?
A new development, but I think, you know, to tear down and replace a house.
Is that grandfather?
Well, that's the question. I think we need, I appreciate you bringing it up, and I think we need to talk about it as the planning commission. I mean, I've got a list of things, that you've all brought up here.
Yeah.
That I think we need to talk about. I don't want to say yes or no to you right now until we have a chance to talk about it.
Yeah.
Are there any other opinions, comments? Yes, identify yourself, please.
Yeah, John Pearson. I'd like to bring up a point that Mr. Jetty brought up with the gas cans and some of the chemicals and things. And you made a statement that that really wasn't what it meant, that about the gas cans and stuff. Well, I've heard the selectmen make statements that other things that, well, that really isn't what we meant. It was said that it's what's written that counts. Excuse me, I have the floor. So, this needs to be corrected. It's what is written in that book that is what's going to matter. It's not what you say up here. What is written in that book is what's going to be counting. Now, what you say up here now. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, John. I have another hand over here.
How you doing? I'm Greg Scott, Bow Street, Webster, New Hampshire. Just got a question about, the wetland. What can we do and what can't we do with it? I've got almost 18 acres and probably half of it's wetlands now because of my lovely beaver friends. So I'd like to know, what are some of the things we can and can't do? Now, you said earlier that New Hampshire usually will stand in the way for agriculture. Can I grow things out there? Can I, what can I do? It's absolutely useless land right now, and it's getting bigger by the moment. Not that I'm going to tell you that, but it just sucks, And
beavers aren't forever.
Yeah, come on up. So I don't know what I can do and what I can't do. If I can go out there and grow beans or grow corn or do whatever, I'll do it. Because it's useless. You were just saying earlier that you can't get the other side of your property. I've never seen the other side of my property. I'd love to. I'd love to be able to build just, a road. I can bring my gator out there to go see the other side of the property without having problems. Because I'll do it anyways, but I don't want to have problems. So those are the things. This kind of irritates me because we're all here for a reason. We all love our town. We all love our property. We do not like being told what to do. No one does. You guys don't like it. So I would just like to know, what can we do?
want to put the permitted uses up on and the CUP uses on?
Yeah, please.
Remember that I said that agriculture, the state,
Yeah.
tilling of soil and planting of crops,
Yeah.
no municipality can regulate, can prohibit that.
So-
Remember I
so-
said that?
so-
You
so
can
if I
till
wanted
all
to-
your
if
crops. Hopefully you won't use as fertilizer that creates algae blooms, but yes, you can
So
till.
if I wanted to go out there and I wanted to till my whole, let's say 9 acres.
That's right.
That's
That's right.
wet,
That's
and
right.
I wanted to plant trees out there, plant something.
Yes.
That kind of goes backwards
Yes.
on everything that you guys are standing for.
What
But-
goes backwards?
Well, no, I mean, go out there and just till it all
It
up. and
does,
get
the
rid of it
state
all.
mandates that, and what we're trying to do is do whatever we can do.
Because I would love to do that, to be honest, because it's absolutely useless land to me.
Cranberries.
Pardon the interruption, I just want to point out that that does not say new agricultural uses for tilling, it says existing.
Yeah. Yeah, but it has tilling soil and growing crops is allowed all the time, everywhere.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a state statute.
Yeah.
And the same with logging. You could log your property, subject to some of the regulations. There is some regulations.
Yeah.
Just best management practices, nothing that we're imposing.
Right. There's nothing in this regulation relating to that. It only has to do with new development.
And now, could you go to permitted uses with a conditional use permit? Roadways with access ways, drainage ways, seasonal docks, boat launches, deck expansions, water wells, replacement septic tanks. That's the one that you were concerned about. We can look at that and see whether that needs a CUP or not. Certain new agricultural, there's some agricultural things that can be prohibited, but tilling soil and planting crops is allowed by the state everywhere.
But I wouldn't have any problems with anyone else if I did that. You know what I mean? If I decided, hey, I'm gonna go out there and go plant Christmas trees or go do something. Not that I wanna do that, but I mean, if I wanted to plant anything, I can go out there and just go ahead and get a dozer and just start ripping and tearing. And I don't think you guys would like that.
Well, we don't, but if the state says that you can till, that's what the language is, till soil and plant crops.
Sure.
And that's what the language the state says, and if that's what you're doing, there's nothing we can say about it. We might cry a little, but there's nothing, can't stop you.
We have other questions, Mary Jo?
I just have a clarifying question about this whole conversation. Sorry. Still Mary Jo Cannon on Pleasant Hill. Are we talking about in the buffer or in the wetland? When we're talking
We're talking about in the buffer, yeah, in buffer, I think, for most things.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I don't know that we're saying that you could put a road through the wetland.
No.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood.
And you can grow something,
Mike?
grow plants in the wetland.
Just my thought also on the dock piece, so part of our permitting process with DES was getting permission for the dock on the Blackwater that we have. They, to Jim's point, they have very clear rules. It depends on what footage you have, all these other things, and they come back and say, they actually gave us a permit to put a dock that's like 60 feet long by, 4 feet wide, which is foolish, but we have that, right?
Yep.
And so I just think adding one more layer and one more group to look at that when there are already processes that are in place with the state. So I just don't know how necessary it is to have docks go through a CUP with the planning board when that already.
But again, I think that would be a grandfathered use if you've done it.
No, I understand that we'd be grandfathered, but let's say we haven't done that yet. It's one more layer, and to Jim's point, it's not defined. It really will be a process that the individual members will be voting on without guidance versus the state has the guidelines and the rules. So I think it's unnecessary here when that process exists.
Okay, I think it might be more flexible, but that's a possibility that we just don't do the CUP for them.
Any other comments? Yes, let's see. Anyway.
I don't think I need this, but I'm Betsy Janeway from Tyler Road. I've been on your Conservation Commission shortly after Jeff Jeffrey, who started it, asked me to join it. And we're not here to take away your rights on your land. We're here to protect one of the most valuable things we have in this town. This town is beautiful. It's forests and it's clean water. And this is what this is about. Good, clean water. People are dying all over the world from lack of water, are getting sick from polluted water. What we have here in Webster is beyond, it's just, Kim Fortune, my neighbor, said this is going to have an effect on everybody here. And you're right, it will have a good effect on everyone here. It's going to protect our clean drinking water. It'll protect our health and the value of your property. And I went swimming in Lake Winnipocket the other day, and I'm so glad the septic systems work. And I went down to swim in the Blackwater River 3 or 4 days ago, and it was brown. It was brown, the water was brown from runoff and from erosion of banks, all those things that we want to prevent happening. So for the sake of your health and the sake of this wonderful town we have, please vote for this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've never needed a microphone.
Tom Barnwell, Beaver Drive. My question would be, what percentage, or what has been the effect of the efficiency of the wetlands? How much has it diminished over the last 20 years?
How much what?
How much has the effectiveness of the wetlands diminished over the last 20 years? And what will this ordinance do to stop or improve it over the next 20 years?
I can't give you, I don't have any resource because there was no measurement of where they were 20 years ago. What I can tell you is that there has been degradation from what a wetland scientist would consider a well-functioning wetland. So there has been that degradation, but I don't know how much of it occurred when.
Well, without that information, how can you consider putting a law in effect? You have nothing to give us that shows how much
because
has been affected.
Because any degradation is too much. That's the issue. Because this cleans our water. So we're trying to.
If any degradation is too much, then no one should live here.
No.
Because living here is degradation.
No. It's a compromise. The idea any environmental protection is a compromise. It's a compromise of some of your rights, so that we can all live with clean water or something that's better for our health.
So I'm asking for the evidence showing how our wetlands have been degraded over the last 20 years, and what this ordinance is going to do to reverse that.
I can tell you that this ordinance is going to help protect the wetlands. No matter,
I
it's going to help.
Scientific numbers showing me how it's going to happen.
I don't know how we can supply that if the ecological integrity wasn't measured 20 years ago. But the issue is that, if that's how you decide whether we should need environmental protection, then we would have probably none. And maybe you're someone that doesn't want any ecological protection, and that's okay. That's all right.
No, I'm just saying prove.
If there was no measurements, how can I prove it to you? I can show you that right now, the wetland scientists say there has been degradation. There is proof of that. I don't know how fast it happened or when it happened, but it is there. It is there, and they're not functioning as well. So that I can prove to you. I just don't happen to have measurements 20 years ago.
Then give us that information as far as how much, if they say it's degraded, they must be measuring it from a certain period of time.
No, they're measuring it from what a perfect operational, in other words, they're giving them scores from 0 to 10. And 10 is they're saying, you're looking at the
wetlands may have never operated at a 10. It may have always operated at a 2 or a 3.
I don't know. I don't know
right,
that.
That's what I mean. You don't know. So how can you put this forward as an ordinance under those circumstances?
Because I don't think anybody around the state has data from 20 years ago. The issue is, we can't, you're saying, we can't, if I could finish,
For more than 20 years.
if I could finish, that we can't put any ordinance in effect at all unless we have 20-year data. That's what you're
I'm asking for
saying.
data. I'm asking for scientific data.
I'm giving you scientific data
Well,
of their
you're giving
state
your
of,
opinion.
their state of degradation right now. They are degraded and they're not functioning well. And the way to, to some extent, not totally, I gave you the numbers, not totally, but if we want to stop the degradation and stop all the pollutants going in it and into the groundwater, then we have to put some guardrails up, that's all.
All right, thank
You know?
you for both of you. Do you want to say something, Chris?
I do. There is proof. My name is Chris Shaver, Tyler Road. We know that over the course of time, the United States has lost 58% of all of its wetlands. That has been measured. We also know that probably every week, possibly every day, DES gets a permit request from somebody in the state wanting to fill wetlands.
That has nothing to do with this ordinance.
Yes, it does.
No, it doesn't.
Very much so.
You're asking us to put a buffer. You're asking me to put a buffer of 100 feet or so on my property.
Well, there are certain things that can happen or not happen within that 100 feet with regard to the flexibility with which this ordinance is written. But please let me try to answer
You're not
you.
answering my question.
I'm trying.
No, you're not.
It doesn't affect you.
Thank you.
I think you should just
Thank
let
you
it out.
both of you.
Maybe.
Any other? Let's let us.
Hi, I'm Sally Emily. I live on Lake Winnepocket on Rolfe Road. So I'm a little familiar with the status of lake property. And I agree with you that there are people coming in and doing illegal things. And how do we stop them? Because the state is not enforcing the Shoreline Protection Act. It takes too long. Wouldn't it be better if we did something local? It would supersede some of the things that are going on. Really, I can't say to your point 20 years ago, because I've only lived here like 16. But I have seen what happens if you have a flood and the water comes rushing down and there isn't any way to filter it, to stop it. I have seen when people just willy-nilly decide to buy property with no consideration for the land. I'm really worried about Winnepocket because there is undeveloped land that could turn into condominiums if more people from Texas come in and just buy the land up because it's speculation. There is a danger in development that isn't in some way controlled. And that's what I'm speaking from.
Thank you, Sally.
I lived on the lake. I've got pictures of me as a baby in the lake 64 years ago. Septic systems used to be a problem on the lake. There were several that were questionable. Starting back around 1975 or so, the state imposed regulations. I don't think there's any septic system left on the lake that's polluted. The biggest degradation to Lake Winnepocket that has happened over the last 60 years is Pond Hill Road ending up in the lake. It completely destroyed that lagoon. That was not by any of the taxpayers in town. That was a failure of the town to protect property. The Lake Owners Association tests the water on the lake, what, twice a year? 3 times a year? Yeah, we test it 2 or 3 times a year. That's one reason why it stays clean. When people do cause problems, we had somebody who wanted a beautiful green lawn, mentioned to them that the fertilizer they used caused an algae bloom. We do have problems with some of the landowners wanting to make their mini McMansions type things and breakwaters and things like that. DES will enforce that stuff. It's real simple. Yeah, call up DES. They have a nice little form you fill out, and they'll deal with it. So that's, again, this goes back to what is this going to provide for enforcement? Because the people who know what they're doing are already doing this stuff. But for the rest of them, how is this going to enforce it? And if it's going to be that we have a zoning officer that goes around and figures this stuff out, why do we need an ordinance to have a zoning officer?
Thank you. David?
So David Hunley again. I'm also on the select board, and I wanted to make one quick comment here. Based on the last couple comments, we do have a new form that we have graciously had made by our wonderful assistant town administrator here, which is specifically for reporting issues with zoning and this kind of thing to the town. And with an official report, we can do things such as have the town contact DES as well as you, which can help throw extra weight around the existing enforcement. So please, if you're talking about there's illegal things going on, make sure that we know about it, because we don't want that to happen either. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Mary Jo?
Mary Jo McGowan. I love DES. I have no issues with DES. I chaired the Conservation Commission for over 10 years and was the chair when the dam went out in the lake, and Pillsbury Lake went out. There were so many wetland permits, we couldn't even keep up with meeting on them and reviewing them. DES is a wonderful institution, but their budgets are strapped and they don't get out for, they come at, for the most egregious things. There are many times we can't get a person. If there's one person now that has
three for the state.
Three for the state that look at wetlands violations. So this is just adding a bit more protection and a little bit more local control over over how we can protect our own water in the town.
But this isn't addressing how that's going to be enforced. Somebody suggested a zoning officer. I think it was you that suggested.
We have one.
Yeah. Why?
In town.
So why not figure out whether the zoning officer, using existing laws, can accomplish all or nearly all of what you're trying to do?
The main reason they can is because the Shoreline Water Quality Protection Act doesn't protect with a natural buffer. Remember I said that usually 100 feet or something like 75 is, they allow that buffer to go away well before 75 or 100. They have less stringent requirements. So, and scientifically, those buffers are not effective to really protect the wetland.
But we haven't tried using what exists.
I'm just
to
saying,
accomplish what you want to do.
I'm just saying,
And you're saying without having used it. I mean, this gets back to the scientific evidence of degradation. If you haven't tried fixing it, how do you know you need a new law that's going to do it?
what I'm saying is the science, and if you looked at some of the science that we posted on the bibliography, says that there's a certain width of the buffer required to filter out the pollutants that I spoke of. And the Shoreline Water Quality Protection Act doesn't meet that standard. And that has scientific grounding, that statement. So this,
but you need to understand that there's scientific grounding for your statement. I'll agree. There's scientific grounding, I'm sure, out there on the other side that says buffer zones really don't matter, and so on and so forth. No.
Well,
I guarantee you, I can find somebody who said that, because there's scientists saying everything all over the place. I mean, there's a scientist who I mean, I hate using this as an example, I just was looking at it, who says that ivermectin, a horse wormer, works on COVID. There is a scientist who says that.
Let's stick,
But what I'm trying to say is, there are scientists all over the place. That's why we're having so many problems with global warming.
How about, I mean, I don't know.
What I'm saying is real simple. You have existing laws. You're not enforcing the existing laws. You've just added a zoning officer. Why not wait and see whether the zoning officer can accomplish what you want to accomplish before you add the law?
Thank you. I think David wants to say something here.
Yeah, so I would like to try and help clarify your question here and hopefully provide you some context. It is absolutely fair and true to say that this wetlands ordinance would be more restrictive than DES. However, the second thing in your response to the code enforcement officer, the code enforcement officer works for the town and can only enforce town ordinances. So DES, while he can see a violation and report it to DES, he and we can't really do much of anything about it. With the ordinance in place by the town, it is now part of the town's zoning ordinance, so the town is now able to enforce it, which we couldn't do the same in the past.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Yes, another comment over here.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is this ordinance gonna go before the town for a vote?
Yes, it will be put on the warrant as a warrant article, and the town will vote on it.
Okay, 'cause commission's already approved it, so, I mean.
Approval just means that it goes on the warrant.
Okay,
No, it has to be a town vote.
okay,
To put, absolutely, it has to be a town vote.
thank you.
Craig, why don't you explain the timeline?
Well, the timeline, as I was just saying, it will go on a warrant as a warrant article, as a proposal by the planning board. And it will say the planning board had voted so many in favor, so many against, okay? It does not go before the selectmen. It just goes before the town. I'm hoping that as I was saying earlier, if there are minor revisions to some wording, perhaps like removing replacement.
Yeah.
We could probably do that tonight and make it cleaner. If there are major changes, then we're going to have to get together and have another public hearing probably next month. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Those changes are substantive, and we're probably going to have another hearing.
But
Well,
Craig,
that's for us. to
No,
decide.
I understand that, but if you make those changes, I'm sorry.
right. But Craig,
Yes.
okay, so the town vote would be next spring.
Yes,
right?
next spring.
That's what I just, the timeline is next spring, the town vote. When do we, the planning board, have to have a version that we want to give?
We've already, in the June meeting, we already approved the version that's currently on the website.
But,
Can we tune it up?
but we're
Yes.
gonna.
Yes, and that's
Right.
what I'm thinking, we should get together. What I'm thinking here is let's take a 5-minute break and then come back together and discuss this as a planning board. Is that
Yeah.
agreeable?
I think if we just tune it up a little bit, not tonight, but maybe
Yeah.
try to figure out, look at some more of this stuff here. Yeah, I think we ought to just, we'll figure out what we need to do with some of the stuff that needs to be taken as far as the septic and the gasoline and a few of that things, and do what we've gotta do and fine tune it,
Yep.
basically.
Yep.
There still needs some, I saw a few other things too that I thought could be changed without much harm.
Yeah, I did too. I've got
Yeah.
this list here. I mean, all your comments didn't go down the drain.
But
I took them to heart. We took them to
my
heart.
main point was, isn't there a several month deadline before
Yes.
that. So that's really what I was asking before the town meeting.
We have
lots.
to have it into the select board, I think, in December.
In December, that's what I'm saying. So even if we have another meeting in a month, we still have plenty of time.
Yeah, that's correct.
I know that's not, you don't want to talk, but we have plenty of time, okay? It's not just already out there.
Right.
That's my
Thank you for,
Good.
thank you.
Yeah.
Kathy.
You're on it.
Yes. So, somebody, you want to make a motion? One of you?
No, Craig, you don't have to make a motion. You just close the hearing if you want.
All right, we're going to close the hearing now because we don't have to make a motion. I think we'll discuss this at some later point, come up with some revisions and have another public hearing. 8:23. We're going to close the meeting. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Participating.
Are we done? We're, all right.
Well, yeah, for tonight.
I didn't want to plus this one, that issue up with this one section, but there are about 4 houses, like, they get one on 5 acres, and 100 lots. The house is entirely or partially. So they suffer the same problem like Jenny has, so it's not a small lot, it's that's what the existing.
What's that?
Within that.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not voting for it either.
In terms of violating the buffer further,
Right.
his case cries out for relief, to me, you know, more than.
Okay, we're not.
Well, what about somebody whose house has been sitting there for
I just don't want to get
years? That's entirely within 100 feet of somebody else's house. And she can't do anything because she's on a 5-acre plus lot.
Yeah, all right. I'm gonna see what they do about it, but you can see my point that, that, you know, you're trying to get about some kind of, I understand. It's all a balancing, you know, it's a balancing.
The Austin house, basically, it's halfway in the 100-foot zone. That's been sitting there since 1950.
Added to it. I think we'd have to put something that would allow adding more on if the house is already in the buffer.
Right, yeah, but I just
But
wanted to
not building, if you've got a blank lot, undeveloped, you can't put the house in the buffer.
Right,
So that's what we're trying.
Right, no, I understand.
Yeah, I get
There's a
it.
lot of things I agree with, I just think this
I get it, I get it.
well written, yeah.
Well, it's these kinds of things, you know, I can tell you there's a lot of ordinances, I read them all, that say some of the things, there is an ordinance that says replacement, but I agree with you.
Not what you mentioned.
Excuse me, everybody.
This is a process, and this is part of it, is
Yeah.
where people come, I
We're trying
can't
to
think of
figure out what
every
to do here
permutation and
as
everything,
planning
you
commission
know.
with the next step.
That's all what this is for.
And
So,
we have a quorum here, so we're actually having a public meeting, and it's a little hard to hear with everybody talking. Does that make sense?
So, just asking, people are gonna have conversation.
yes,
Just
please.
keep it down, or well, maybe that's done, because we have other stuff on the agenda. The part, the public hearing part.
See you later, nice meeting you.
Thank you.
So they can use the information.
So, let's schedule the meeting in 2 weeks. Thursday night.
What will that be?
So we have to check to see if the hall's available.
In 1874,
All right.
in 1874, lost it as a result of
If you want to make it, if you want to schedule a date, I'll double check.
So, that would be a Thursday night? Could we do it like maybe on a Wednesday night? Would that work out with you guys?
We can do it, but again, we do it on
What's that?
We can do it Wednesday, but again, we do it on Mondays.
Okay. We'll work out.
No earlier than 6:30.
So Wednesday,
Okay.
Wednesday shouldn't take 29th? Wednesday the 29th? Yeah.
I am.
Okay, 29th.
September.
7 o'clock.
Russell, is that okay?
So I'm gonna double check on Wednesday the 29th
Right.
at 6:30?
7.
7.
Excuse me.
September.
Good.
I think we do have a meeting at that time. Let me check. That's for the CIP. That's for the CIP.
Yeah, see, I've got the Appeal Fair and Freiburg. I gotta get the show in animals. So I don't know what my dates would.
So do we have to be there because he has to record everything?
I believe so. Yeah.
Well, we can either do it here or we can go to the
Yeah, why not down there? Saving setting all this up. But it'd be a public hearing again too, right? Correct? Just for us?
Just for us.
Okay.
On the 29th.
Okay.
Just for us.
Yeah, all right. So do it downstairs. Don't have to get all the fancy.
Conservation Commission might join us.
That's fine. They sit back.
Good
They
night.
should.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good night, thank you.
So, Susan.
Yeah.
Obstacle. There, now you come to
There we go. Fix that. Well, I mean, I usually don't.
Is that something that you could join us with?
If you guys want me to, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
Okay?
We'll talk
Because I
about
want to make sure this gets drafted in a way. I hear what they say, and I want to provide relief for that.
Yeah, no,
I just want it to be drafted
there's
in a way that'll be legal.
some things that need to be tuned up that
Absolutely.
so
I'm with
people
you.
are all good.
I'm with you.
Yeah. In other
I
words,
understand compromise.
Yeah,
I've been doing this
yeah.
a long time. All right, bye-bye. Good night.
yeah.
So no, we should be good on that date. Oh, we have a work
29th?
session Saturday, September 29 at 7, right? Is that what you said? Wednesday is the 29th.
29. Yes.
So that works.
That works.
It's a busy day for me, but it'll work.
Nice.
Meetings on
Well, they put you in for a race.
Good luck. No, we're limited on what we have here, so. Do we want to table some of the agenda items? How long this one? Yep. So I just like make a motion that we're just tabling.
I second it.
Well, I can't make a motion.
He can't make.
Oh, you can't.
I'll make a motion that we table the rest of our meeting until next meeting.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Motion adjourned.
You need help cleaning up here?
Yeah, I gotta.
I move we adjourn. Second.
What's the time?
All in favor?
Aye.
8:30. That's a clean number, I like it.
Where are all
Thank
these
you,
chairs
Russell.
though?
So I think the chairs can stay out because Marty's setting up to do
What
movie
about
night on
these
Friday.
tables?
I'm gonna try to do something about the tables.
You're gonna have to do something
I
about
think
it.
I'm gonna have to.
So what do you wanna do with these chairs?
I'm just gonna leave the chairs arranged like this because I'm assuming if people are coming here to watch a movie, they're gonna need to sit.
Okay.
So I think that's all right, but I don't want Marty to have to do it all by himself. Yeah, set them all.
What's that?
Yeah, we're just, yeah, we'll have a work session. Yeah, I'll notify everybody.
Yeah,
that we're gonna
yeah.
have a work session between 29th and 7. I got here, mostly because
Would you have enough time to go through what we discussed together? Just kind of something?
I'm just
We,
gonna
you know what
I
we
will
need,
be
you know
able to
what
get
we
it.
really need to do is go right through their list, okay? Kind of half outside the night shit right out, figure it out right off, then the whole meeting.